Today's Cowboys Report and that intro video made possible by Roan. I'm rocking one of their polos, and you can get 20% off your order by going to roan.com/chatsports and using code chatsports. With training camp almost here for the Cowboys, looking at some potential sleepers. Guys that are on the roster bubble at best, most of them on the wrong side looking in. That could be surprises that could emerge as Cowboys training camp gets going. If you are excited for Dallas Cowboys training camp, I want you guys to like today's video. I know it's been a rough off season, but I am looking forward to training camp getting underway. So like the video for me on today's show. It took all of my power to not make Deuce Vaughn the Cowboys sleeper. But I want to focus on guys we haven't really talked about all that much. And I think that's Royce Freeman more so than Deuce Vaughn. Well, we've spent time talking about Zeke and Rico Dowdle and Deuce Vaughn. I think Malik Davis could also be a viable option here as well. But I wanted to put Freeman on this list as one of the very few outside additions this offseason by the Dallas Cowboys, and I think has been left off of most 53-man roster projections. Maybe we're overlooking him a little bit. It was a very small sample size in Los Angeles where he finally looked like the Rolls Royce we remember at Oregon, to wind back the clock a little bit there. I am intrigued a little bit. And there's been a report that the Cowboys weren't going to sign Zeke because they had Freeman. That, of course, ended up not being true in the slightest. But I don't think this is someone we should totally ignore for a couple reasons. A, if he could be an efficient early down runner, the Cowboys need one of those. But also, the 53-man roster, when you're picking your top 3 or 4 backs, it's not always the first best running back, the first best or second best running back, and third best running back. Special teams matters. And in a way that Deuce Vaughn cannot, and TBD about Malik Davis even, Royce Freeman helps you on special teams. He played a decent amount last year. That stuff does not go overlooked, being able to be a coverage guy. Now, how the new rules impact things, I think is still a fair question mark, but I think Freeman as a sleeper at running back makes sense. So predictions. I think we'll have more no's than yeses, which maybe means I'm doing this right, by the way. Does Royce Freeman make the Cowboys roster in 2024, the active 53-man roster? Y for yes, N for no. Go vote at the pin poll, especially if the ad break comes here on YouTube. Number 2, and I'm going to cheat and go more than just 5. Princeton Fant and John Stevens Jr. We have spent some time on both of these guys since Dallas Morning News, amongst others, have hyped them up. Fant, I do think, does not make the 53-man roster, but he was on DMN's breakout candidates list. The coaching staff seems to like him a pretty decent amount. This is Noah Fant's cousin, by the way. He played some on special teams last year, and maybe isn't a name we should overlook. And I do believe if John Stevens had been healthy last year, he would have been on the 53-man roster. So his inclusion is less sleeper to make the roster and maybe more sleeper to be tight end too. Now, he has to become a better blocker. He's more of a pass-catching move tight end, and he's almost a receiver at Louisiana, frankly, than Luke Schoonmaker is. He's more in the Peyton Hendershot mold. Fant maybe could end up being a better blocker when it's all said and done. But I think the tight end room, it's obviously Jake Ferguson at tight end 1. Who makes the roster beyond Luke Schoonmaker, and who is the number 2 tight end? I'm starting to feel like, and maybe I'm just creating it and overreacting because there's nothing really going on between now and the start of training camp. It's been a long couple weeks here. Maybe that tight end 2 job actually is up for grabs. Now, today's Cowboys Report is made possible by Roan. The mail closet was due for a radical reinvention, and Roan has stepped up to the challenge. They've got products for every occasion. We're talking pants, quarter zips, dress shirts, polos, blazers, and they are the world's most comfortable in all phases. And there's no big, ugly logo that I think some of the brands these days fall in love with. I like a minimalist approach, and Roan delivers in that way. Their signature 4-way stretch fabric is breathable, flexible, and works everywhere from your commute to work to 19th hole to I can wear this golfing and feel great in the process. The Commuter Collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to roan.com/chatsports and use code chatsports. Save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you go to RHONE.com/chatsports and use code chatsports. Find your corner office comfort today with the link in the comment section and the description of today's show. Number 3, and I am cheating again here, it's my show, all of the wide receiver depth. And I'm talking about not the guys that we know are going to make this team. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks. I think Turpin, Brooks, and Tolbert are also exempt from this list. We've spent time on Ryan Flournoy, to be fair. David Durden, who I have heard and maybe would have made the roster had he not torn his ACL last year. Stephen Jones was a big fan of his. Racey McMath, who we'll spend some time on. Jalen Cropper, Tyron Billy-Johnson, guys that are not undrafted free agents in this year's class. We've hyped Ryan Flournoy in being a different type of athlete. So is David Durden. David Durden is 6'1.5", ran a 4.46 out of West Florida. He's kind of freaky as an athlete, and he had fans in the organization. He was at least going to be on the practice squad before he got hurt. Can I find a vertical threat? Can Durden be that guy? And I think Racey McMath is a bit of a sleeper. And I put him on here not because I think he's actually a great wide receiver. He is 6'2.5" at 217 and ran a sub-4.4 40. Normally, the big, tall, fast guy is an impact player in the NFL. Why does he only have 2 catches on 14 targets for 48 yards, Tom? What's going on here? Well, he's a little stiff, and he never produced at LSU. He had 522 career yards. This is like a worse version of Bryce Butler. But he's got special teams gunner ability. And that could be the final difference between a different wide receiver 6 or 7. I like Jalen Cropper as a slot receiver. I think it might be a year away from him making the 53, but you get him on the practice squad. We'll see if anyone else, Tyron Billy-Johnson ends up emerging or not as well. But I think they're in good enough shape at wide receiver. And this happens every year, guys. Every year we fall in love with somebody. And more often than not, they don't even end up making the 53-man roster. Who remembers John Vay Johnson? Remember him? TJ Vasher had fans. It happens every year. Who will be our pet cat at wide receiver at camp this year? Somebody will impress early, and we'll get excited about him. Let me know who that is in the comments. Let's go to defense. Number 4, Tyrus Wheat. And this feels weird to me, putting Tyrus Wheat on here, because he was on the active roster last year. We just never talked about him during games. I think outside of the long snapper, I think there was no player on the Cowboys 53-man roster who was more than just a practice squad call-up that we spent less time talking about. He was a special teamer, and they kind of tried to make him into this weird off-ball linebacker at times. Well, if the Cowboys are going to utilize Micah Parsons as this kind of hybrid defensive end linebacker who still mostly rushes the passer, but can maybe do some 3-4 Sam stuff, maybe Tyrus Wheat, and I think also Byron Vaughns fits that mold. That's kind of the archetype. These hybrid edge linebackers. Vaughns might be more of an off-ball linebacker. Wheat might be more of an on-ball edge rusher like Micah is. But he was on the roster last year. And pretty consistently, he's not on the 53-man roster projection. It's a new regime, but I think if we talk about people we're overlooking, that's one of them. Now, if you guys want more Cowboys videos right here on the channel, great. All you have to do is subscribe. Hit that sub button at youtube.com/CowboysTV. Now, given the way the Cowboys like to utilize their draft picks and they like their guys, I think Eric Scott Jr. is going to make this football team. I'd be surprised if he didn't. So he's on here as a sleeper because we just kind of have ignored him. It's, Kalen Carson is a new fun toy. They did invest some in Eric Scott too, by the way. The flip side was he was bad last year. He got smoked in the preseason, wasn't impactful in coverage. It's really bad numbers in a small sample size, and basically got a redshirt year. Well, Mike Zimmer's good with corners. Maybe Mike can maximize him in a way Dan Quinn didn't. And I think that number 4 cornerback spot is up for grabs. Why can't Eric Scott win it? And maybe if he can get some nickel run, emerge as a viable replacement down the line for Jordan Lewis. Now, who is your sleeper? Your underrated player for the Cowboys in 2024. Sound off for me in the comments of today's show. We did a similar video to this last year, and we had some hits. We had a guy like Rico Dowdle was on our sleeper list. That was a pretty big dub. We also had Israel Mukuamu on there, and I can't give it up. I like Izzy. I think he's been miscast at times. When he's played a very small sample size on defense, he's actually been kind of good. He played really well in that Bucs playoff game. That's stuck in my head. But what I want to see at camp, where's he playing? What do the Cowboys think of Mukuamu? I had him as an outside corner coming out of South Carolina with a higher grade than Deshaun Wright, which for the record, I think I was right about. Because Wright has not been good. Mukuamu's flashed occasionally. But does Dallas still think he's a safety? Because if he's a safety, he's at best safety 5, and I don't see much growth to be better. But if he's a corner, maybe he can be corner 5. He's fighting for a roster spot this year. I don't want to give up on him quite yet, though.